And what is up, guys? Welcome back to the Superdwarf Show. My name is Evan, and this show is brought to you by Ship Your Reptiles. So, Ship Your Reptiles is the only company that we ship with here at Reach Out Reptiles. That's because when we ship with them, we know that they're the experts in shipping of any species you could think of, right? They genuinely care about the animals. They're awesome people. They have great passion. Reptile people at heart. They really do care about their customer service. Their team is amazing and top notch. So we've done business with them for many, many years, basically from the beginning. And that's why we've chosen to partner with them and bring you content like tonight's show. So glad to have everyone here tonight. Appreciate that. So, hey Garrett, like that new desk you got there. Oh yeah, you were working on it for a while. Seemed like all day. Garrett, you want to check your mic right quick?
Can you hear me now?
Good.
You guys hear me all right?
You guys hear Garrett? The thumbs up.
Good?
Good.
Okay. Man, without even Thomas being here, we got the same kind of technical. Evan, you've learned from the master. Funny.
Okay, yes. And all the yeses. Yep. We're good. It's the issues with technology.
Absolutely.
Speaking of Thomas, where is Thomas, Garrett? I'm not Thomas, obviously. You haven't noticed by now.
Everyone's like, wait a minute, what happened to different? Yeah, Thomas is actually on vacation with his. We have Evan Woldridge, who's our second year intern here, filling in. So, other than me not being able to tell you guys anything,
Got the audio working faster than Thomas.
that might actually be true. That was pretty funny. So Evan is actually, some of you guys probably remember him from last year because he did do an internship before. We had a whole video that involved you, right?
Yeah.
Did we get the you handling a rat while screaming? Did that go online?
It's on social media somewhere.
Oh man, that was a highlight memory. But
yeah,
I've actually known Evan for a long time. Do you remember when we first met? Wait, first of all, how old are you right now?
I'm 20.
20 years old. And when we first met, you were how old?
15?
I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Reptile Super Show.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely. Out in LA, which is where you were living at the time.
Yeah. That was the first show I met Garrett. I met at the US Arc auction. I had to sit with you at the table. Felt pretty VIP. As a 15-year-old.
Yeah, he was actually breeding leopard geckos back then, which when I was 15, I was breeding leopard geckos. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
We had a little chat, and I was like, dude, he reminds me of 15-year-old me. But your dad was there at the show, and I was like, dude, this on it. You were already running your podcast?
Yeah, I think that was my first show I actually vended, that show.
It could be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know that part, but I remember meeting him, and I'd already heard your podcast.
Yeah.
Which was pretty cool. So yeah, we met in person. We went to the US Arc auction late night. Sat at my table, and you had donated a really nice, like all tangerine gecko that I won back at the US Arc auction, but I didn't want any more leopard gecko. Gave it back to him.
Yeah, he played with the tail like the whole time. He was like talking with everyone, just like chubbing on this leopard gecko tail.
Little known
like,
fact.
You can have it back.
Leopard geckos' tails are the best. I just squeezing the tail or petting them underneath. The tail, the underneath of their tail is like what it is about the scales. They're so.
It's like a velvety, like
creamy.
Nothing else.
It's creamy.
Yeah, cream.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're like, dude, this. You gotta go check it.
Yeah, gotta get everyone touching the. That should just be its own booth. Like, forget about sailing.
Yeah, $2 per chub of a leopard gecko tail. I'd be down. I'd be down.
That's the name.
Chubs. So anyways, yeah, Evan's really good with marketing. Pretty cool. And then you came to the internship. I remember I had even, by the time you were at the internship, I don't remember which came first, egg or whatever. But by that time, I had been on your show. We'd already met at LA. But several years had passed. You looked different because obviously,
yeah,
the internship 19,
right, yeah.
So I was like, what, 5 minutes interview with you?
Yeah.
Where I was like, wait a minute, this is Evan Wooldridge. I know who you are.
Right. Yeah. Things started clicking.
Yeah, I was seriously impressed with how well he was put together. If you guys haven't checked it out, why don't you tell us about your podcast, your gecko breeding business. So if you guys check out his podcast, especially back to some of the early ones, realizing that he was 15, like crushing it with the podcast game with some of your guests and interviews.
Yeah, it's like that first season I had like a bunch of heavy hitters. Ron Trimper, you were on, Brian Cusco. It's like the best in like the reptile industry.
Yeah, it was a really good season for like a 15-year-old, and you've been doing it ever since, right?
Yeah, still going. Strength in Leos. If you guys want to check that out, we just started YouTube, so guys could check out the YouTube. Doing all of our content on there and then putting it on YouTube.
Pretty fun. So, what are you majoring in college that you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I go to the University of Wisconsin, rising senior. So one more year to go, then I'll finally be out of prison. But yeah, majoring in marketing. So want to get into marketing and that kind of stuff. First, I went in, like, love the geckos, love doing that. I'm like, hey, let's do like zoology. So I did a few zoology courses, and this is stupid. Like, this is all stuff like you don't have to major into zoology to go. Just have like I just could have a bunch of cool friends that like work at zoos and own reptile facilities and just go play with their stuff. I don't need to be in zoology for that. So I'm like gonna drop this.
Sounds pretty close to that reptile life, yeah.
Right, exactly. Learn how to do all the practical stuff of that. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping.
So Evan's gonna hang out here with us at Reach Out Reptiles, help us develop some new strategies. Running the live stream tonight, using podcast experience, and his business with Decked Out Geckos is actually our sponsor for tonight. Yeah, so this is for a Patreon giveaway. If you're on Patreon, after this live show, you can jump on Patreon, click the link. We have a private Zoom meeting that we're going to be doing, and anybody who goes to that is qualified to win. What's the prize, Evan?
Yeah, so we're going to be giving away, sponsored by Decked Out Geckos, where I do all my gecko breeding and things like that. We're going to be giving away a 2023 Gecko Symposium at October NARBC Tinley.
So the Gecko Symposium is like all things gecko, super high level speakers and everything, and it happens right during October. It's for the Friday, right?
Thursday.
Okay, yeah. So Thursday is the symposium. Friday is the VIP setup with NARBC, and then you stay around for Saturday, do the US ARC auction. It's always the highlight of the trip. Yeah. And you can literally hit all three events in October. And Evan is going to pay for it's like $80 a plate or something like that to get to the.
Be all the talks included. Lunch is going to be included. It's going to be a great time. Get access to top gecko breeders in the world.
And obviously, Evan's like big news gecko industry. Got all the. Yeah, he's going to be giving one of his spots away. So $80 value for the giveaway, and then sitting next to Evan Wooldridge at a gecko symposium.
I'll take it.
Well, dude, it's been a long time since we have done a live. Well, you and me has been a really, really long time.
Yeah.
Fun fact: we have kind of like a template that we go through, or like, oh, let's do this, and this on the live shows. That was created by Evan last year.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun project. A year later, seeing it like honed and narrowed down, and then throwing it all together. Kind of cool.
No, it's awesome. It's seeing the project go full term. We'll let you guys still use it.
Very fun. So yeah, since you and I have been here on the live, man, just so much stuff has happened. We had Retic Fest 2 weekends ago, and then the Schaumburg show in Illinois just last week. So there was a ton of stuff going. Yeah, I don't know. You didn't go to the Schaumburg show though. I went, saw a lot of you guys there. What's up? Raise your hand in the chat there if you went to the Schaumburg show. So that was cool hanging out. I had a lot of good times. But where did you go?
I was in New York at a marketing conference. Boring stuff. Much rather would have been playing at Schaumburg.
You would think that people putting on a marketing conference would be able to pull it off without it being.
It was, you know, all the big hitters, Nike, Apple was there, and I'm like, I just want to play with snakes. That's what I was thinking about the whole time.
That's pretty funny. I was totally thinking about Nike and Apple the whole.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, we have this guy out. You guys know the drill. This is one of my snakes. This guy's a pure Superdwarf. He's a locality cross. Old school, like Garrick DeMeyer line, which was a blend of localities.
Also used to be a leopard gecko breeder.
Who?
Garrick DeMeyer.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, what hasn't he done?
Yeah.
Now he's more known for, like, ball python.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And everything.
That's pretty cool. But, yeah, I always loved a lot of his. He had a Canadian importer, had his line. Came from, like, the islands around California. And then this was bred into one of the A-line locality cross, kind of perfected. Who knows what he has in there? You guys stick around till the end tonight. Who will be able? And we actually, to talk about Retic Fest, for you guys that missed out, I know you're really curious. We have a live studio audience tonight. We have with us tonight is Darren Miller. Why don't you come up here, Darren? Darren actually made it to Retic Fest for the first time this year, right? Very first Retic Fest ever. What'd you think?
That is correct. Awesome. Awesome making different tick and style breeders in general. Hearing Daniel talk about his islands and what he discovered there. Educational.
Everybody talks about like same order, like, yeah, the snakes were awesome, the people were awesome, the food was awesome. Like nobody ever forgets the food. Yeah, what were some of the things that you were pleasantly surprised about, or like that you didn't expect going into?
I didn't know what the term. Awesome make.
Yeah, pretty cool. For those of you guys that don't know, Retic Fest is like it's just purely for people who are interested in dwarf and superdwarfs. You don't have to be a keeper or anything. We do coordinate it through our Patreon. That makes it a lot easier for details and stuff like that. But anybody that's a member of our Patreon, lowest level, out and hang, and I mean, how would you describe it? It's basic for someone that has no clue. I always kind of say it's like a backyard barbecue, but at a snake facility.
A block party for.
Yes, yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah, exactly. So we had snakes out. We had people getting tattoos again. Stella from C&B Reptiles was back by request. Were you around towards the end of the night when Karma got Karma out of the cage and she was like literally climbing through the rafters?
I saw the pictures. I'm like, oh, I should have stayed longer.
It was so crazy. Evan, did you catch any of that?
Yeah. Karma was awesome. On top of there, like, I've ever seen. Just that perspective. Or not a Superdwarf.
I was going to say she's not a Superdwarf.
That'd be crazy.
200-pound animal.
Yeah, exactly. Better not be a Superdwarf. Everyone was laughing at me because they're like, look at Garrett. He looks like a little boy again or something. And I'm like, wow. And they're like, haven't you ever seen a snake climb? And I was like, not one this big, this big. High. They're like, why didn't, haven't you got her out to climb like this before? Over 20 feet. Like, I've never had a beam this big before.
How do you coax an animal that big down?
Yeah, it took a little while. It was kind of fun. But we let her cruise around and stuff like that. Got some pictures. I think she had it. She's such a good girl. She was like chilling for pictures with everybody earlier in the day. Did you get a picture with her? Yeah, that was pretty cool. Isn't she impressive?
Top of the food.
Yeah.
In any environment.
Yeah.
But still very well mannered.
Yes. And everybody knows, like, okay, Retics, but not very many people have got to, like, sit around hands-on, hanging out with it, or, like, try to move it, or even just feel it sitting on your lap. It's crazy. Crazy. I don't know. Still blows me. Oh, okay. So What? I'm gonna put you on the spot here. If we could like add one thing that Retic Fest experience, this is a good question, for you guys too. You can, if you were, I'd love to hear. What would you love to see if we did Retic Fest again next year?
Dylan, you want to make sure you're speaking into them.
I know you had the different localities out on. I think maybe playing with localities.
Like,
obviously, we played with localities.
You mean like physically get them out?
Yeah.
And that'd be kind of show and tell. Yeah, a lot of people commented on that. We pulled out our like parts of our trade show to have those kids. Grabbed a bunch of adults that were like good representation of each of those localities, which is pretty cool. We work with seeing them. Which one was your favorite? Not necessarily like your favorite locality, favorite in the Convalongan? Yeah, that's a popular. Not very many people have got to see those
it in person.
Yeah,
it's just
most people.
crazy color.
It was really neat too. That particular, and she was hanging out next to the Kalatoa male, like right next to each other, and they're almost like polar. Slate gray and chaotic thin. So one of the things that here, Darren, while you're here, is subadult pure Superdwarf. He's way too old to not have a name yet, but we're still working our way through the collection. So tonight, you guys will be able to put out some names. That I'll you right it towards the end of the show. Mind jumping back in and name for us?
Sure.
And then if Darren picks your name and your suggestion is to his liking, that snake will be forever branded with that name. So that when you come to Retic Fest, you can search for it. We had a bunch of people doing that this year. Like, I named one. We had those big green tags. Where they're like looking for back in the day. Most of these are like my personal animals. Have one. What's up, Evan?
Hey, you guys want to get closer to the mic? There's issues. I don't know if that's the
Is this close enough? All right, let's try this out. Well, okay, so Evan, let's go ahead and do you want to come back in at the end and we'll put your naming hats on. You saw the snake. Darren, get the creative juices flowing, and they'll make the suggestions. Evan will shout them out to you at the end of the show. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Right now. All right. Very cool. All right. Well, that's pretty cool. Good times. We always love having it coming in tonight. And we'll be able to hang out with Darren some more. Your party. You guys are a part of that. Can you hear me okay now? Doing good? Give us a thumbs up and stuff.
Not sure.
You think it's running through the camera mic and not this mic?
I don't think so. I'm getting your audio levels. So.
All right. Well, I'll talk right into the mic. Can you guys hear me okay if I'm doing this? And we'll jump into our topic for tonight. Evan, what's our topic for tonight?
So tonight we're talking about Superdwarfs and if they are overrated, underrated, are they rated at all? What's up with them?
Like, they're definitely underrated.
Underrated. Okay.
I might be biased.
A little bit.
I don't know so what are we looking to answer here tonight, Evan?
Yeah, we're trying to see if Superdwarfs are really where they're at compared in the reptile industry compared to other things. What's their value? What do they bring to people? And is it just going to be something, is this a fad that's happening and everybody's trying to get into Superdwarfs? Is this something that's going to last, or is it going to be like banana ball pythons, right? Where they're like 50,000 one day and they're like selling for like $50 the next.
Okay. And I like the way that you pose the question too. You're like, what's their value, like kind of to the pet keeper too, right? So maybe not necessarily just monetary value, what do they, like, do they fill a hole in your life? That kind of a thing. What do they bring to you? You got to have a Superdwarf as a part of your life, right?
Yeah. So I guess just from the jump, Garrett, if you want to give kind of your spiel on what do you think, like first thing you hear that question, like what comes to your
mind? Well, okay, so here's my perspective is that we just got back from the Schaumburg, Illinois show. It's a big Chicago show. It's kind of like Tinley Light. But to be perfectly honest with you, if you guys attend Tinley and you haven't been to Schaumburg, you should definitely go to Schaumburg. That's probably my favorite reptile show to vend. It's much less congested. It's in like a larger, nicer venue with a lot of supply industry around and stuff like that. Plus, being this time of year, it's the perfect time of year for us as Superdwarf breeders because most of our stuff is hatching out late spring, early summer. And so if you go to the March Tinley show, not that much has hatched yet. If you go to October, everything's kind of been picked through to a certain degree. So if you really want to see like the peak of reticulated pythons each season, whatever the different vendors have, then you definitely want to hit the Schaumburg show. So anyways, with that, are we good, Evan?
I think so.
Oh, you were making faces at me. Those are just your general faces.
Yeah, that's how I make. When I hear about Superdwarfs from you enough, I'm just like, okay.
I see you, Evan. So coming from that perspective, there was definitely retics at the show. I don't think there was any other like Superdwarf breeders at this show. Whereas if you look at some of the other segments, like there was definitely leopard geckos at the show. There were crested geckos at the show. There was plenty of ball pythons, quite a few colubrids. And then there was a few odds and ends. There's some of the newer kind of niche keepers doing stuff like, like anoles and micro geckos and some of those things that are kind of popping up on the scene, isopods and different invertebrates. There's a lot. It's incredible to me. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising just with the wealth of species of like insects and invertebrates that there are, but how many of them are making their way in. Luke's Bugs was a big factor at this show. He actually donated a lizard that was his first lizard he ever bred. It was a Gastrophlopholinus prasinus. Yeah, I don't know how to say the genus name on that, but like the green keelback lizard or whatever. So he's a young guy too. And he's bred for the very first time, his first lizard, and he donated it to the U.S. ARC auction.
Yeah.
That thing raised something like $14,000.
No way. They're cool looking lizards. They're like bright green and the red tongue.
And I think their retail is probably like $400, $500, $600 somewhere in there. But people kept winning it and donating it back, and it was like this game throughout the auction.
Yeah.
I have never seen a reptile. This is just personally, I might be wrong, but I've personally never seen, I've been to a lot of U.S. ARC auctions, never seen a reptile go for that much money at an auction.
Yeah.
There's always something ridiculous like pink bunny slippers that go for thousands and thousands of dollars. But typically the U.S. ARC auction is a place you can get really good deals on stuff, But this guy, like I know I won it twice personally, and and yeah, it was just a blast. So anyways, there's some niche stuff, but Luke is more known for like his praying mantises and stuff.
Okay.
We picked a couple of those up. They're awesome. Thank you for that, Luke and Al. But they were at Retic too. You got to meet them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so. They're like following us around the world. All out here in Pittsburgh for Retic Fest, and then Chicago for Schaumburg show, and then back in LA where my family is right. Yeah, good times. Anyway, all of that is basically to say like Superdwarf prices are still very strong. They're growing. There are more people getting into it. There are a lot of things that people want or wish they had in Superdwarfs, or maybe they do exist, but they can't afford it yet. Like, oh, I really need that morph, but it's with that like way outside of my budget for right now. So I think that means like as more of those are produced and the price can come down slightly, a lot more people can get in. And just being that there are so many different things, I don't know, Superdwarfs are cool because they kind of straddle two groups of reptiles. You have like the super well-established group, right? Like crested geckos or something like that right now, ball pythons. And then you have the niche ones, which would be like the micro geckos, the mantids, and stuff like that. Because superdwarfs in and of themselves are quite niche. There are a lot of people that have some smaller retic bloodlines in their stuff as retic breeders. Retics are very well established. But there's not as many people, exploring that niche of small size. But I think there's a lot of people that want to. So I would say, like, if you were to graph it, they've been definitely underappreciated for a long time. And now people can see that value. I don't know. At some point, I think it will like peak once lots of breeders start to go in, or, there's all kinds of circumstances between economy and practices of the people, stuff like that can hurt or help or harm, the whole thing. Are we actually championing the animals? There's a lot of questions, but I don't know. All I can say is that right now they're definitely underrepresented. I think that there should be 2-3 more tables out there. Like for all the people, this is not a knock on ball python. A lot of people buying ball pythons at the show. A lot of ridiculously beautiful ball pythons there. I'm always blown away. But you'll have like several large vendors and then many small vendors, all of one species like that. There's kind of like a saturation. If I had, let's say I got my first show, I've got 5-6 clutches, and I have enough to finally get a booth, right? And I have 1 8-foot table, and I put my ball pythons out there. It's going to be really hard to be noticed, to be seen, when there are so many other ball python guys that have been doing the show circuits and stuff for a long time. If you show up with mantids, you get recognized right. You're like the only one there. And so there's probably a lot of people that are like, oh, these are really cool, and I don't see anything like them. Some of us go to a show to buy a specific animal, but then we also want to like look around and learn something new. Yeah. So I think superdwarfs are right there, where we have a fairly large booth for superdwarfs, but if someone else had nothing but like high quality, like locality or high percentage superdwarfs, cool morphs, all that stuff, even if you just had that 1 8-foot table, I think you would probably by default gather a lot more attention than some of those more represented species. So in that way, I would say that superdwarfs are...
Okay, cool. And it's also really interesting that superdwarfs, it's like a beginning market, right? Like 10 years ago, like who's out there like talking about, maybe you, but in terms of like mass population, no one's really raving about superdwarfs. But then on the other hand, like where I come from, leopard geckos, the market that's been around for decades at this point, right? Prawn shrimpers, like into decades of generations of leopard geckos, and it's a much mature market where you had that spike when you got into breeding blizzard lizards and things like that, and the albinos came out, and it's a big craze, and people are all trying to make the various combinations of normals and blizzard lizards, and then getting the albino in there, and then there's like this race to create different morphs. But after that, it kind of just crashes. And we've kind of been in a spot in leopard geckos where we're kind of on this lower end of the cyclical nature of the hobby. So in superdwarfs, like what makes you think that superdwarfs aren't on the edge of just being at the peak of where they're at and then not crashing down in terms of the market?
Well, that's a really good question. I would say it's not like with leopard geckos. So just to give those of you who may not know a little bit of background, one of the reasons why I connected with Evan, he's selling leopard geckos at 15. I started commercially breeding leopard geckos at 14, and I went until I was like, I don't know, 17 or 18, something like that. So right around that same time frame. But you're right. When I did it, it was like they would call something a carrot tail if it had a little bit of orange at the tail. All the leopard geckos were just yellow.
Yeah.
Or really the only morph then was the blizzard lizard. I think shortly after the albinos came in. But we had things like jungle or blackback, or these names for that were really just describing a look that an animal had. It was they didn't go away. That is to say, a lot of people are still breeding leopard geckos. I think you could go to any reptile show in the country and find numerous leopard gecko breeders at any show, even small. You could also go to any Petco and find a leopard gecko constantly available almost any day of the week, right?
Yeah.
So they've kind of shifted into where there's probably more leopard geckos than ever bred, and they're getting pumped out there. So the challenge facing me would be with Superdwarfs would be a different one than I'm like, I'm trying to make enough of what people want to supply the market to get enough people interested in, so that we aren't the only ones that are kind of like focused on building up the hobby and getting about keepers.
Yeah.
Whereas the challenges facing you are more like, man, everybody's making crested gecko, even as I'm starting to, or leopard gecko, sorry, even as I'm starting to like get into a cool project, I'm watching the prices fall.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's that quantity production game. And so I think if I look back on like the leopard gecko is a great analogy. In the beginning, it was like, hey, we have morphs, lizard, and there's an albino, right? And then the next thing is like, can I put these morphs together? Combine them all. You see this with ball python market. Put them all together. And so we did. We made blazing blizzard lizards and stuff like that. And then after a while, you've kind of made all the different combinations you can. And you step back and you realize, probably half of these are really ugly. You know what I mean? The other half look cool, but like just because it's a 2, 3, 4 gene animal doesn't make it look better. A lot of times it takes so much away from what we love about the natural pattern that it's like unrecognizable, right? It becomes very generic. And so then you back out of it and people start they start breeding with intent. So it's not just let's make a double homozygous animal. They're saying, let me make an animal that I can take that little orange band at the tail and cover as much of the gecko as possible. That, all of a sudden, and you know this, right? That's a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah. Once you get into line breeding and like getting those small things and adding them from generation to generation, it's really just compounding and putting the time in.
Yeah, and there might be morphs that can help, right? Like, so I know a perfect example, they're chasing this with axanthic and ball pythons right now. Axanthic is cool, it takes all the browns and the yellows out, but they still kind of brown and yellow out as they grow up. So they're like, okay, what's cool about axanthic is bold black and white, right? And then they start pushing, like, what will make this more black and white? And maybe it's another morph, like a piebald, axanthic pied. Or maybe it's like fire, yellow belly, pastel, and, and combining all those morphs. Or maybe it's just literally picking out the best of the best painstakingly for a long time. And if you look at the most mature kind of like pet markets would be things that have been around not for decades, but like thousands of years, like koi. The level of perfection that there's names for morphs, there's names for bloodlines, there's names for varieties, but the ones that fetch the high dollar, koi, are basically free, right? They're way cheaper than even a leopard gecko of any kind, but they can also be way more expensive than the top 20 leopard geckos ever sold combined, right? And they've been around for thousands of years. And so I think if you can kind of like look forward and see where a market will go and start to pursue that. One thing we talked about, you guys that regularly watch, this, we talked about, this is like we're just entering like the Marvel Universe Phase 2 movies, right? Where it's like all the players are out there now. We know each of the Avengers. We saw them all come together. They played together, defeated the aliens. We're all excited. Where could it possibly go from now, right? And you don't know, and then it spins off into like a bajillion directions, where they're like way out in space or way down into, what is the quantum realm, like super tiny, and then they're like, maybe there's parallel universes, and it just becomes mind-boggling. But I think each of us that would be fans of those franchises actually prefer a certain, genre within that. So I think that's where they need to get to. I think first of all we need to make the morphs and combos. Like there's certain things that everybody wants to see. Like one for me is mocha anery. right? We just made the first dwarf mocha stuff this year, and they're het anery. So I got to grow them up, and then I can make aneries that are het mocha, and then I want to like breed them out into the right looks and stuff and put them together. And then we'll finally have a mocha anery. So there's morph combos like that, but then it'll be like, how do I make this mocha anery more of like a black and white zebra snake, you know? And that will require a lot of selective breeding. You know, Chad Brown from Ship Your Reptiles was out here, and he imported some of the original like locality Superdwarfs, but he's been out of the game. He hasn't really looked at them in a long time. So he was checking out all our animals and everything, and you know, his favorite was coincidentally, well, maybe it's not a coincidence, a bloodline that I've been working on the longest. A lot of you guys know that I love Jampea, is like one of my personal favorite localities and one of the earliest ones I started working with. And I've been just cleaning and nicing it up forever. The White Diamond bloodline being bred into that. And I had gotten down to, it was just an anery tiger, you know, but it was this super, super clean anery tiger. That I was just really proud of because it's taken me forever to make a tiny little change to it. But he was like, this is the best snake here. And so he's coming in with no real context of like what morphs are expensive or cheap, what's hyped up or underhyped. Because I think you probably have overhyped and underhyped morphs, localities, segments, or whatever within any niche too. And that all balances out in the end. You'll see the ones that should be the most appreciated as things progress. They become the most appreciated. And ones that, you know, were overhyped in the beginning drop back down. You know, they was kind of fighting for a place to even be there in the first place. And those lose the hype over time. But it was really cool to see something that was, you know, like a passion project of mine be something that he picked out. So I was like, that's cool, you know, like, I don't know. I worked really hard on that. And some of these other things, it's like, well, I just made that because people wanted to buy it. I bought 2 animals and put them together, and that was that, right? So there's many levels of maturity in each breeder's journey or in the market overall. You know, a lot of times you'll hear the guys come in, they talk a big talk when they bought a couple nice animals or whatever. They haven't really like done anything yet. And sometimes you have to chase some things down and realize, like, again, triple homozygous, that kind of stuff. Be like, you know what? I don't even like this. I've been working on this for 12 years. I think I should scrap the whole project. You know?
Yeah.
Start over with what I really like.
Right.
You know? So, yeah. And that's where you start to get, like, a maturity and appreciation for stuff. So
that's awesome.
It's cyclical. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, you can kind of like look back on the leopard gecko industry, right? And all we can do as Superdwarfs at this point is look forward,
right?
Because we're at the beginning of that cycle, and you are not at the end of it, but you're at the end of one era, considering the next, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool. Super cool thing in Superdwarfs is there's so many other genes that could be shrunken down, and there's still so much to be done. In terms of the work, and I think that's where a lot of people have an opportunity. With leopard geckos, there's not a lot of, like, people are chasing morphs or combinations anymore. It's more like, how could we line breed these, or make these a little bit better, or make this stripe a little bit cleaner, or make this gecko a little bit more orange, where you guys are still at that point where there's just a ton of things where you guys can make Superdwarf pies, and that could, you know, be produced. And there's all these other genes that still need to get shrunken down. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to get in and have that opportunity to really work on things and be in that, almost that chase and that beginnings of people coming into the hobby and really being able to make a name for themselves really early, because they got into it, they know what they're doing, they have a plan, and they just have to kind of go through it and execute it.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, one thing I always say is, like, staying true to the plan is, like, if you execute a really bad plan, you'll probably still be successful. You know, whereas if you have a really good plan and you never do anything with it, you just kind of, like, drop off, or, you know, people look at you for a while and then you fade away, you know?
Right.
And
exactly.
Time will sort all that stuff out for everybody, you know?
Yeah.
So
in terms of breeding, you'd say super underrated. Is that where we're going with this?
I think that they're finally becoming rated.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because, like, if you looked at, like, 10 years ago, you could really buy any Superdwarf you want for like $1,000, you know, unless it was literally a morph that cost more than that in mainlands, right? So if a mainland morph was $3,000, the Superdwarf version might be $3,000. But now we're getting to the point where, I mean, there's certainly like very high-end combos that are just entering for the very first time. Like I was talking about the very first dwarf mochas. That was a really big deal for me. It's a super important piece of the puzzle moving forward to the future. You know, looking forward into all that kind of stuff. So those were pretty expensive. Or another, you could take the other way and go with like a Karampa or something like that. They're exceedingly rare. We're still the only ones in the U.S. to have produced pures, and it's been a couple years since we made any. So those are really expensive. But you never had those, you know, so we're talking about $10,000, $20,000 snakes. You never had that whatsoever 10 years ago with Superdwarfs at all. So as people are getting the message and they're starting to see the different values, I mean, Darren was up here a minute ago talking about Tom Belongans and saying that's the first one I've actually ever seen, right? Most people haven't even seen that. That's kind of like one of the least known localities in Dwarf and Superdwarf. And already we get messaged constantly about Tom Belongans. When are you going to breed them? And can we get some more? And all that kind of stuff. And it's, you know, something that we're working on that a lot of people have yet to see or even know exists. So sometimes something's just underrated because of sheer ignorance. People just don't know that it's there. And once you're like, check it out, this is what a Tom Belongan looks like, right? Like Darren, it's just like, I can see the value in that. That's an incredible animal. Like no explanation needed. So as we're presenting more and more of these animals, they are, you know, becoming more appropriately priced. But there's still a lot of Superdwarfs that have yet to be made that way. You know, like we'll make double hets for some crazy future combo. And they're priced fairly high, but they're never priced as high as like the first visual combo, right? So to me, let's take Pieds, for example. We made last year double head albino Pieds, right? I think Superdwarf Pieds and albino Pieds are going to be awesome. The first Superdwarf albino Pied to hatch might be a $20,000 animal, right? Like legit, good, small genetics albino Pied. But pairs of double hets did not cost that much, even though they're the ones who can make those. So those double hets or those new animals like titanium is coming into the scene. There's a lot of cool stuff just scratching the surface with that. Anthrax, like I said, the mochas and some of those albino combos. There's a lot of cool het stuff that is very underrated. And then a lot of times, like that albino Pied, that first $20,000 one, I think that's where they're being rated. Like this is the first one I ever sold. Took me 10 years to make it. It's going to be expensive, right? People finally realize the value because they can see it. Because it has shallow value. Beauty is skin deep, and there it is. Boom. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful, right? And people love to jump in at that. But then once you get them established and they're being pumped out, then you get this whole kind of like second wave of people that market them super hard to try to add extra value when the supply and demand curve is on the way down, right? Like more people are getting them. There's more of them available. Lots of breeders can produce them. And then you'll have like the second wave people coming up saying, what I have is just so great, even though they're kind of late to the game. And that's where they get a little overrated, right? I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Is there like a leopard gecko morph that's like everybody's talking about, but you as an insider, and you don't have to list it by name if that will be, sometimes that's like taboo to talk about or whatever. But you as an insider in the market, you can see prices coming down, right? Like there's a lot of them being made. They're being steadily supplied. People are still talking about them because they remember 6 months ago them being a really rare thing, but that was so 6 months ago. You know what I mean? And not everyone's caught up yet. That's where they start to be overrated and you start to see price drops.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember last year, I was telling you about this new morph that I got. That was the first in the US to get And then I showed you the Satpuriensis, which is the new.
That's a locality.
Yeah. So that's not a morph, but I remember telling you about the morph and being super excited for the morph.
Oh yes, the striped one.
Yeah.
What are they called?
Ciphers.
Ciphers, yes.
So, I remember, I'm so excited for this thing. And you're like, no, this is where it's at. You got to get the localities and get those breeding.
So was I right? Was I wrong? How you feeling about it now?
Right. Totally flip-flopped. Yeah. You have them in the hundreds.
I promise we didn't talk about this before right now.
Right. I think I bought my first one for like $3,000, and you could get them for like $1,000, $800 now.
A year later. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you like kind of over the looks of them? Or are they still fantastically beautiful? Or
I still love them. Yeah, there's still a lot of stuff to be done with them, but just kind of how the market goes. Once people start getting into them, and they're recessive, which is nice. It holds their value a little bit longer. But with leopard geckos, you have a year basically until a little bit younger than a year for some animals, and then they're ready to breed and ready to go. So once you have people being able to pump them out that quickly and start getting visuals out, that value starts to drop. Or you have something that's subspecies that's a little bit harder to breed and a little bit harder to get your hands on, the value is going to last a lot longer for those.
Well, and what's kind of nice, so what is it again? I can never say the name, but I know the picture of it. You'll have to type it out in the chat so you guys can look them up. They're pretty cool.
You can call them the Satpura gecko, leopard gecko.
You know what I think? They're like the Sulawesi for retics, where when you think of a retic, you're like, that is a retic. Big yellow head, bold blacks, big silver side spears, gorgeous animal, huge like cheek muscles, all that stuff. The donut patterns going down, that's like a pure Sula, right? It's kind of like the classic retic, which is why we bred that stuff down in Superdwarf, because we're like, we just want to make that, in our size range. But the gecko that you're talking about, to me, it has like everything cool that a leopard gecko has to offer from the wild in one animal. Is that fair? Is that accurate? I've been out of leopard geckos too long.
I'd say that, yeah. I feel like it's like the classic leopard gecko look that people saw like in the 90s or whatever, 80s, 90s.
Yeah, and if you were to breed for it, you wouldn't want to like dramatically alter it. You just want to like improve it, right? Like, so you don't want to change it into something else. You just want to bring out the natural qualities that are there. Right. If you had a list of things that define that, like I know they have a white collar around the neck. They have beautiful purple and yellow bands. So you could do things where you're like, well, what if I make it like 80% purple and 20% yellow, where the bands are different, or the vice versa, maybe more yellow, less purple. Or maybe you could have like cleaner background and bolder pattern, but staying true to what it is. I always love that with like Arizona Mountain Kings and stuff like that. Some of those established species are just so fun to tinker with. But once, like, I don't care for like a snow Arizona Mountain King personally. I don't like those at all. I love seeing new morphs when they come out, but I would much rather be like, I wonder if I can get like 10% more white on this thing without losing the red and the black. And then another 10% and another 10% generation by generation. So, yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And as people start to see it, there's something about that classic beauty. It's like a sleeper build on a classic car.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's one thing if you roll into town with the spinning rims and the flames and all that stuff. And it's not that stuff's not cool or whatever. But, like, I feel cooler when if I rolled up next to you and like just a really classy looking, let's say you're doing that and it's like a Willys hot rod or something like that. And I roll up to the stoplight with you and I'm just in like a nice long low, like a 1969 Lincoln Continental, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then it's got, but then it's got a little work under the hood, nothing, it's not like I'm dropping a small block Chevy in there or anything, but I've done it right. And that thing just blows your doors off and feels like I'm driving a couch down the road at the same time. There's something beautiful about that, you know what I mean?
They're always going to be in style no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. So
nice. So just to cap us off, I'm going to go through each section that we hit on quickly, and then I want you to say overrated, rated, underrated.
All right, you guys should do this too. Do this in the comments for us.
Get these in the comments, guys. I want to hear your opinions on that. I want to see where you guys stand in terms of Superdwarfs.
Okay.
So, first question, you ready?
Yeah.
Cool. From a breeding standpoint, Superdwarfs, are they overrated, underrated, rated?
I'd say some people see it, but overall they're underrated.
Underrated.
Like I talked to a lot of retic breeders that are like, I don't get it. And I'm like, If you don't get it, you don't get it. That's underrated, you know. But the people who are actually breeding them are like, wow, I get it, right? So depends on who you are.
Cool. All right, pet standpoint.
I think they're rated. I think enough people have experienced them or have watched other people experience them online to know how interactive, intelligent, and joyful they are. You don't really hear some of the old misnomers about like, oh, they're terrible and they're going to kill you or they're flighty and bitey. And, you know, you don't hear too much of that stuff. I think people are like, this is going to be a good pet snake, especially if I put the time into, you know, forming a bond with the animal.
Nice. And then lastly, from a business standpoint, if someone wants to get in breeding, wants to bring it into a small hobby, even a business, where does that land?
I want to say rated because I think a lot of people realize how much work there is to do with the Superdwarf thing, but that's what I want to say. But the truth is, I think they're still on the underrated side because if people put their money where their mouth was, they would be purchasing differently. And I know there's not enough time to explain what I mean by that, but we see the sales, and I still see people buying like, ooh, this one's pretty, and this one's pretty, and this one's pretty, and then they have a collection that they can't really like put together, right? So they're still doing it as like a collector more than a breeder, whereas if you're like, no, from a breeding standpoint, where I either want to like have a lot of options so I can selectively breed something amazing, like specializing in one locality and its crosses, or if I want to make a certain morph a certain way, you're going to really not worry about that as much. You're going to be the type that's like, I need 5 of these females and 1 of those males. And you put your money right there, you know, and then you put your nose to the grindstone, you grow them up, you put in the hard work, you treat them well, and then they will really pay off for you. And I don't see very many people buying in that direction. So I'd like to say rated because people are willing to pay a lot of money, but if they're making poor investments, that, you know, it's not the ingredient to get them to a goal, right? It's not a step in the process. It's just what they like that they happen to spend. Then, you know, you're not doing it right.
How do we get people on that right path to make those smart investments?
Just spend some time, like reach out to us, either like info@reachoutreptiles.com, an email, or give Joe a chat or a call, and spend some time talking about your goals. What happens is everybody shops. They're like, show me a picture, pretty face. I'm looking for a certain label at a certain price, you know? And that stuff is fine, but if you start there, you're going to then, as you put together a breeding plan, you're reacting to what you've already bought. But if you say, you know, my goal is to, and you want to think more meta, you know, like I want to make really small, beautiful snakes that are all bright orange or black, or, you know, I want to make the cleanest, boldest stripes head to tail. Or it could be something different. It could be like, you know, I want to be able to reliably and repeatably make $50,000 a year without too much effort in because I want to semi-retire. That could be a goal, right? And then you put together your breeding package to get to that goal. And then the other stuff doesn't really matter as much, you know, because you have a plan and something, you know, like you have a vision for what's coming. You're buying a future vision that doesn't exist yet. So you're not really worried about the pretty face that's staring at you from a computer screen on Morph Market or whatever, right? You're much more worried about your vision for the future.
I like that. It's like seeing the potential.
That's what you have to do. Yeah, you have to first know what you want in order to know what you should get.
You're just dropping bombs, guys. Wisdom bombs. Everyone's saying, yeah, worked with Joe, was able to guide me. Definitely underrated.
Yes. Yeah. And he, you know, he will really do a good job trying to find you that right animal. I mean, we spend a ton of time doing that. All of our talks are always like, are we listening to the customer? What do they want? You'll see a lot of like younger sellers. Someone's like, yeah, you know, I'm thinking about this. What should I do? And they're like, definitely don't do this and do that and don't do that. They're just teaching you from their limited perspective that they've already had. You know, maybe they did something wrong and they're just literally telling you what they did wrong. They're not actually listening to you and helping you determine what you should do because you're in a different situation than they are.
Yep.
It
Dylan
could
said, for me, it was saying the morph I want and knowing how far out of my price range it was and wanting to be able to make it. Now I've got the pair, and I will be able to get a bunch of them.
Yeah, and so I would predict that if you follow through with that pair, you raise them, you produce them, and when you first see that thing coming out of the egg, and this is just from a lifetime of experience with this, like the carbon fiber would be like that. I think I know what it's going to look like, and I would love to create this, and if it looked like that, it would be awesome. And then generations later, seeing that first tiny nose peeking out of the egg and blowing bubbles, you know, it's like, holy smokes, it worked. I did it. That's crazy. This snake exists because I dreamt it up a decade ago. And otherwise it never would.
That's crazy.
It's so fun. So my prediction for you, Dylan, is that the first time that you get what you set out to do from the beginning is probably going to be one of the most personally fulfilling moments of your life because you know that you put in the hard work, you did it right, you followed through to the end, and you accomplished your goal. Wherever it goes from there, it almost doesn't matter as much because you have that, you know? The rest is just talk until you do it.
True. Gotta follow through with those plans.
Yeah.
Someone asked, is there ocelot in Superdwarfs?
It's something that I know a lot of people are working towards. So that's a great example of another, I was mentioning anthrax and stuff like that. That's another morph that needs to be brought down. If you think there are literally dozens of mainland reticulated python morphs that need to be brought into Superdwarf. And if somebody wanted to do that kind of stuff, whether it's ocelot now, that's one that's like, with the mainlands, you know, like at Schaumburg show, we saw quite a lot of ocelots. Their price has certainly come down a lot. So they're on that down there. Adding the Superdwarf to it, I think adds a legitimacy and a longevity to that project that should be pretty cool. Yeah, if someone wanted to do those kinds of things, then they need to collect, you know, good, small, pure locality or pure Superdwarf females and stuff. And you would want to think about, you know, a lot of times people are like, well, I want Kalatoa. That's the best, right? But is it really? Like, what do you like about ocelot? Because, like Darren, I mean, you were talking about the bold contrast of the Tombolongan. They might not be the smallest Superdwarf out there, but they might be the exactly right one to start the Superdwarf ocelot project, right? You can continue to refine from there, but if you want to make some jaw-dropping ocelots, you know, getting something like that or even a Slayer or whatever it is. Or whatever the look you're going for. Maybe you like the blue background, then you go with Madu, you know. A lot of these different localities have different things to bring to the table.
Nice. I think that's the best thing to do. It's like when you see what that Superdwarf has, Superdwarf or Dwarf, and then getting the best qualities of that animal and then crossing into a morph. I think that's where all the fun happens.
That's the start of that lifelong journey, not just let me put these together and the Punnett Square says I'll make this, right? It's kind of like, how do I make these like truly unique to me? And that's where that real personal satisfaction comes in. Doesn't matter how much they're worth, right? It's just fun because you dreamt something and made it a reality.
Nice. Cool. Well, appreciate you, Garrett, for that. Going through all those.
Yeah, good talks. That was pretty fun going back. What did you guys like? You enjoy having Evan on here? Should we get him back in? Maybe when he goes back to school or whatever, we'll have to phone him in because that was pretty fun. Leopard gecko, you know, versus Superdwarfs and learning lessons from both sides. I thought that was pretty cool. Thanks for participating, Evan.
Of course. Yeah, hopefully the audio wasn't too bad. If not, you know, it's with me, it's with Thomas, whoever you're going to get. There's going to be audio issues.
Apparently we need to buy a new mic or something. All right, you guys want to name a snake? Darren, you want to come up and pick a name? Sure. All right, Evan, why don't you tell us how this works?
Yeah, guys, so if you guys want to get your keyboards ready, we have Darren coming up. You guys are going to drop a bunch of names in the chat. I'm going to read them out, and Darren's going to pick the winner of that snake.
So it's totally anonymous. You won't know who it is that's making the names, right? So, Evan, you're just going to read the comments only. And let me go ahead and describe this guy here. You want to hold him?
Yep.
All right, so what we're looking at here, it's a pure Superdwarf, and I picked him not because of his locality traits or anything like that, because he's a mix. I picked him, A, because he's the mix of a lot of cool bloodlines that go back many decades that people just cannot comprehend or understand today, how much effort went into these because values have shifted and changed. And I think a lot of the OGs that were putting this stuff together, they actually did a lot of things right that we don't give them credit for sometimes, right? Can I say that? And so this is kind of the combination of what I think a lot of those guys were all working towards when I looked up to them and I was just getting into it. So he's got the chaotic pattern all the way down the back, right? I love the split saddles, how it goes back and forth. He's got huge white side rosettes, one of my favorite traits on any retic, really, with big, bold black borders. Kind of makes me think, especially with these angular, drippy tail patterns, I'm almost like can imagine there's probably a little Karampa in there maybe, or just some real crazy, bold, thick black Kalatoa, because you just don't see that much black on a pure Superdwarf. And yet it's got these perfect silver, clean sides, almost no speckling. We know that he's got a fair bit of Kalatoa in him, but aside from the neck, there's not a lot of like loose speckling. The second half and first half of him almost look like two totally different snakes. So that's what he's going on. He's kind of like sentimental guy. I don't know. He's 3 years old, and we might have bred him once, but I don't think I ever got a clutch out of him like we tried him to a little girl, and you know, I just don't think it worked out or whatever. He's certainly breedable. He's a young adult male. He's got growing to do, but this is just kind of one of those snakes that's like really cool for me to have around. When I look at him, I see a lot of legacy, a lot of history. So that's my take on the snake. Evan, do we have some name suggestions?
Guys, it's time. Drop them in the chat.
Let's see what we got. Don't forget to hit that like button, too. We had a...
He's telling me his name right now.
Oh, he's whispering in his ear. Okay, there you go.
Hodgepodge.
We had a lot of really cool comments, and thank you guys for those of you that stopped by at Schaumburg talking about the last Clutch Files video. That was pretty cool. That was some of the GC snow chinos, the zombie snow clutches. It was kind of neat to have those in person and have the video just released. So everyone's like, I just saw the video, and there it is in person. That was really cool.
All right, so we got Hodgepodge, Kaleidoscope, Ziggy, Puffy, Storm, Fruition, Slash, Forest, Gramps, Bam Bam, Wonder Boy, Bubba, Optimus Primal, Picasso, Ramen, Littlefoot, LOL.
We already have a Littlefoot. Can't do that one.
Got one. Brumilda, Zeus, Prism.
What do you think?
Prism.
Prism? Last one takes it. All right. Prism. That's kind of a cool name. Who shouted that one out, Evan?
Zach Bell.
What's up, Zach? Congratulations. All right. Prism it is. Now, Zach, you have to come to Retic Fest next year and try to find him, huh? That's pretty cool. Prism is great. I like it for his pattern and then the iridescence, too. It actually, it works out. Perfect.
Guys. Nice. So if you guys want to continue to come on this awesome journey with us, we have our Patreon after show for everyone who's on Patreon. Again, we'll be giving away that awesome Gecko Symposium ticket that's going to be at NARBC October on the Thursday of that weekend. Be sponsored by my company, Strength and Leo's Decked Out Gecko.
Thank you for that, by the way, Evan.
Yeah,
That's a really
of
cool
course.
prize.
Yeah. So hope to see you guys there on the other side.
All right, guys.